Let's begin. Today's block is Daf Samachay Amid Aleph. We are up to the 2 dots, 4 lines from the top of the page. So we're talking about a couple who were married for 10 years and have any children. So they have to divorce and then they get married again. And then we had an argument how many times they get married. We say that now they have a chazaka that they're barren or they're sterile. And we said, Rebbe of Shimon Gamliel. And we passed yesterday that sometimes we follow Rebbe and sometimes we follow Reb Shimon Gamliel. And we said when it comes to marriage, it's we follow Rebbe. And we had two opinions whether it means the law of Katlanis, 2 of her husbands died. And in the Gemara itself, we had an argument exactly what is the cause. Is it because of the mazel, and we don't care how they died, or is it only the relations with her that causes their death? And then therefore it's only if they had relations, but if she was engaged or if somebody had a crash, doesn't count. And in halach we have a machlekes, which is which way do we go? Is it the mazel, or even they just died for different causes? Even if it was an accident, not natural causes, it's considered part of a katlanis. So the big argument there. Okay, we're up to the Gemara here, 4 lines of that. Tell them what we learned. What happens? Nisas Ladishan. She was married to her husband, with no children, right? So we don't know who's the cause, he or her, and therefore we force them to divorce, and she gets compensated. It gets full ksuva. The Shani, then she married a second time. Didn't have any children again, so then again he gets divorced. The Shlishi, but then to the third person, loy to nasi. She should not marry anymore a person who should have children because we're going to pass like Rebbe that twice as chazaka. And therefore, she shouldn't marry somebody who, who has the mitzvah puravu because she has a chazaka that she cannot procreate. She should marry somebody who already has children and fulfill the mitzvah puravu. What about nisas lemisha ein lebanim? What happened if she defied us that she married somebody who it doesn't have any children yet, so has a mitzvah puravu? Then teitze b'loy ksula. Since it was illegal for her to marry, they have to divorce. She doesn't get her ksuba because they should never married in the first place. Regarding a katlanis and all that, there's a big machlekes a Rambam Rishonim whether there's an issa for her to get married or is it a preventative measure because we're being very, very cautious. But where there's an issa to get married, they have to get divorced right away, and she forfeits her ksuba. And the Mefarshim already asked, Tais and all other Rishonim, if 2 times makes a chazaka, then after the second time, when she gets divorced, so no, she's proven now that she's barren, she should also lose her ksuba then. And as we'll see in a minute. and they want to know, why is it only after the 3rd time that she loses to another second time? Taisa makes an interesting distinction between Isser and money. When it comes to Isser, we are much stricter and we say she cannot marry a 3rd time. But when it comes to money, we say it's only after 3 times that she's been proven to be barren, and therefore, after the 2nd time, she doesn't lose her ksuba. And then Tais says a very odd thing, and it remains the question. We normally say that we are far stricter with money matters than with Isser. That Isser, even a suffix, we're machmir, but by money matters, we don't go after, for example, we don't go after Roiv even. We need a much more, surety. Roiv is the probability is not good enough. And here we say the other way around. Anyway, the Gemara says further. So the Gemara. Interesting question. She married a 3rd time. Let's say she married a 3rd time, and again she has no children. So now she's proven the track record 3 times. Definitely, she's substantiated that she is the one who's barren. Can the previous 2 husbands say, "Look, now that you've proven to us that you're the one who was at fault, then we shouldn't even have paid you ksuba because the whole thing was based on an error. We thought we could have children and we couldn't." Can they say to her, now you've proven all along that you were the one who's the cause who couldn't have any children? Or perhaps she can say, previously it was your problem. Today I'm getting older and therefore I can't have children anymore. It has no bearing on the past. So the Gemara Mistabra makes sense. She has the right to say, it happened now, and therefore, just because it does not reflect on the past. We have a question. What happened? What happened if she marries a 4th time, didn't listen to us, And v'hoyla or even to somebody that had children before, which you said you can marry, and now she suddenly has kids. So the question now is, Mao the titri l'shlishi, can she go back to the third husband and says, aha, you didn't want to give me a ksuba because you said it's my fault. I just proven it's nothing to do with me. It's your fault. Amrin, we advise her, please do not make these accusations or do not make these demands, because you do, it'll harm you more than him. And why is that? Because then the Matzi Amala, the third guy can say, I know I did the only reason why I divorced you was because I thought you could be children. Now that you tell me that you could be children, I would never would have divorced you, which means that the divorce was based on an error, and therefore you're still a married woman, and any children you have now, Mamzayden. So you can't have it both ways. If you think that that it was a mistake and you were able to have children, and therefore you want him to pay the ksuba, then he can use that same argument and say, well, in that case, the get was never a valid get in the first place. The first two husbands can make that argument because they didn't divorce her because they know for a fact who's bad. They just, the law is, since we don't know who's at fault, the whole thing was a suffix, you're giving her a get. You can't come back with arguments afterwards. Masculine, Papa says, so what if she doesn't make any argument? But we should make the argument. But we should step in and say, hey, 1 second, this whole get was based on an error, and therefore the get is not valid. Nimtza get bakul ben mamzerim. Ella, we don't even step in as well, because I mean, we will argue just like the previous case, we argued that now she became that became better now, that no reflection on the past. So too, or let's say she couldn't have any more children, she says no reflection on the past. So too, if she did have a child, we can say that something happened and she's able to have a child now, but previously she couldn't. What happens? What happens? He says definitively it's her fault, and therefore I don't want to give it to her or anything else. It's not a question of whose fault it is. I know for a fact it's her fault. I'm all good, and I took all my tests. Everything's all right. And she says, no, it's definitely your fault. I'm all right, and you're the one who's at fault, and therefore I'm entitled to my ksuba. Any of these discrete things between him and her, the men that she's always believed. The time of why she believed more than him. He kind of loved the Yoda. She knows whether he was able to put the semen in order to be able to procreate. It has to come in like an arrow, it has to come with force. And she knows whether it came in with force or not. He doesn't know. So according to some Rishonim, this is a question. This is a case of Bori Vishema. She says definitively, I know for a fact that you're not capable, and he just says, Shema, maybe I am capable. And Bori Vishema, whenever it's definitive and versus a suffix, you always follow the Bori. Other Rishonim don't like that at all, because in the Gemara Ksuvah that you base on base, we learn all about that, and we actually have Machlekes. What is the law about Bori Vishema? If body other for not, and the Gemara actually says an opinion there, a body v'shema body lavod, because you want to take money out, here you want to take the ksuba out, body v'shema body lavod. And we don't say to do because you're definitive, that's enough grounds for you to take money, and that she's ready to get a ksuba. On the other hand, others say when it comes to ksuba, it's different than an ordinary case of money, because a ksuba is as if you already got as soon as you get married, you already have a ksuba in your hand, and since it's a lien against property, it's as if you already collected. So it's not a question of extracting money, it's a question of maintaining what you already have. Others argue that's Bishama's opinion, and others argue that even though it's Bishama's opinion, he still holds to it to some degree, and therefore we can use that argument. Says more further. What happens? What happens? He says, you know what? I'm going to put it 10 years go by to have no children, and he says, I know for sure it's your fault and not my fault, and I'll give you a ksuba. And she said, no, it's your fault. So he said, you know what? I'm going to make a test. I'm going to marry a second wife, and let's see if I can procreate. And if I can procreate, then obviously it's not my problem. Omar Iyu, Ezel, I will go. I'll marry a second wife. I will check myself, see whether I can produce children or not. In other words, have two wives. Omar Abi says a person cannot marry two wives. Abbazu, even in this case, he has to divorce her first and pay her out. I say, anybody who marries a second wife, has to first divorce his first wife before he marries a second wife. Rava says, a person can marry more than one wife, and there's no limit, as long as he can afford it. As long as he can afford it. Now, the big machlek is, first of all, this thing that as long as he can afford it, this din of Iraq. And then came along the rabbis and put a cap of 4 women. A person is not allowed to marry more than 4 women. And most of Shem hold that. Mugi Yosef said that's only a law when it comes to Yevama, but ordinary wives you can have many more if you want to. And this thing that as long as he can provide for her, he can afford to have a second wife. There's a machlekes. Is it an Isser, or is it up to her? In other words, if the wife says, "I don't mind if you marry as many as you want. I don't care if we can't afford it," does she have the right to say that, or is it a law that you cannot marry more women than you can afford? What is the logic behind Rava? So the Mefarshim all explain. And others, they all explain as follows. They say it depends where you live. If you live in a country where there's polygamy is forbidden, then when you get married, it's as if there's an unwritten agreement that you're not going to marry more than one wife. But according to everybody, you're not allowed to marry more than one wife. And Allah will be like Rab Ami, you can't, because if it's a condition of the marriage. But if you live in a society where everyone has more than one wife, multiple wives, then it's as if you made up during the marriage that I have the right to marry more than one woman, and as if she tacitly agreed. Otherwise, she should have said something, because that is the prevalent custom of that place. That's how this law works. Came along a Ben Gershom and said, but you're not allowed to marry more than one wife. And he did say, however, according to Halacha, till the end of the fifth millennium. So, and which means in the year 5000, that Isser ended. The reason is to avoid conflict. In fact, this din of Rava that you can marry more than one wife, that the halacha is that he cannot force his first wife that the second wife should live in the same house. She can say, I don't want it in this house, have to live somewhere else. Just like Rachel, Leah, they all have their own tents, they all have their own homes, their own houses. So Rabbi Negation's takana was a cherem that ended to the end of the millennia. It still continues according to most poskim, not as the cherem, but as a minig, as a very strong minig. And according to Ramah, he says the minig now is to continue as if it was a cherem. There is an argument in the case where there's a mitzvah, for example, Yibum, will Rabbi Negation suspend his Isser and say, in this case, you're allowed to marry two wives because the mitzvah of Yibum or not. And also, what happens if she refuses to, let's say she's a Meredith and she has to have a get and she refuses to have a get? What happens then? Do we suspend, according to the Ramah, bring two opinions, whether we suspend the Cheder of Benegation in that case he can marry a second wife, or the Cheder still remains in place, and whether he writes a get? Nowhere in Shulchan does a mention about this Hetzemei Rabbanim, which is brought down a little bit later already, that you that we don't want you just willy-nilly to marry a second wife. We'd rather have a Hetzemei Rabbanim with three communities, and we allow you to marry a second wife, but we also want the get, and in fact money for ksuba as well, so that if when it comes through, let's say she's incapable psychologically to accept the get, which is meredith, that she can then receive her get. Says further, who Amar, he says, he claims that you miscarried in the middle of 10 years, so therefore you did have a child, and therefore we start counting the 10 years from when the miscarriage took place, and therefore the time's not up, and I don't want to divorce you. She says, she says, no, I never miscarried. And therefore 10 years expired, I want to get out of this marriage, I want to have children. Amar says, even in this case, she's believed, because the Misa de Pila, if it's true that she miscarried, why would you go around claiming that she was barren? It's much worse for her reputation to say that she can't have children than to say that she had a child and miscarried. Many women, that Shulchan brings down that most women, miscarry sometime in their life, especially in the beginning. Nobody goes around saying that they're barren. Let's say she miscarried, she miscarried 3 times. Who's going to fall? And she now has a chazaka that she cannot really carry a child, that she will miscarry, and therefore he can divorce her, but she receives a get. Because maybe for whatever reason with you, she won't be able to have a child, it'll always miscarry. He says it only happened twice, and therefore I don't have to divorce you. Let's try again. She claims it 3 times. I want to get out of the marriage. Such an incident happened in Shul. And they said she's believed. If it's true that she did not miscarry 3 times, now she'll have a reputation that she can't have a child. She's not going to in any way hurt reputation unless it's the truth. So therefore we believe her. The Gemara in the Gemara in the Darm says that if a woman comes up over and says all of these stories, you don't really believe her, because we say that maybe she just wants to get out of the marriage and made up concocted these stories. Why suddenly over here we believe her? And the Rif explains the difference who initiated it. Over there is talking about she suddenly came out of the blue and made those claims. Here he's the one who's making these claims. So therefore when he's making claims, she totally believed. But if she came out of the blue, then we have to be suspicious and do investigate. Says the Mishnah. Ish mitzvah pruru. If a man has a mitzvah pruru, I will lay you not the woman. On both them, who it says, they should bench them. But Yem said to them, pruru. I want you to go have children, pruru plural. So therefore, they both have the mitzvah. As I explained to you yesterday, the one who says Tanakama said they don't have the mitzvah is because a mitzvah is only when it's not natural and you have to force yourself to do something, or train yourself to do something. Mashenki by women, it comes natural to them to want to procreate, so therefore there's no mitzvah. Something about it. How do you know this? How do you know that according to the Tanakama, it's only on the male? Fill the land, fill the land, and they should capture it. Each it's generally a man who goes out and to war to conquer rather than a woman. Adarabba, they keep sure, Tarti Masha, the pasuk itself, so they keep sure they should conquer. It doesn't sound like plural, they're both a couple. But even though we read the Kufshua, it's written the Kufsha in singular. It says, so because it says in singular form that I am the Eibishter and the prayer of as David says to what do you call? This is what Yaakov was saying. So therefore we say Yaakov. So therefore we say that it's singular. About only male. Just like it's a mitzvah. That if you can reprimand somebody, see somebody doing something wrong, it's a mitzvah to reprimand them if you know that they're going to listen. Not to say something that you know for sure they won't listen. And because it says in the pasuk, Rashi explains, you have to reprimand them. Only someone that is going to accept it from you. Even though in the Erech, another way we have Gemara where it says even 100 times you continue being machir them, and even if it comes out to sticks. So very different Rishonim give different differences when we say that you should continue to needle them, and when we say that you should, if it's in public or in private, or whether it's a mitzvah the Torah, something it's mefurish Torah, not mefurish Torah, and so on. Others say only your close relatives you should reprimand and be persistent, but not somebody who's a stranger. In fact, not only is it a good idea, but actually not allowed to. It says, don't go ahead and reprimand somebody who is a jester, somebody who's going to mock you. He'll hate you. But you should admonish somebody who's wise, and he'll in fact he'll pay you a debt of gratitude for straightening him out. You're allowed to change your story, you're allowed to lie for the sake of peace. It says the brothers came over to Yosef and said to him, Avicha, your father, he said before he died, lema the following. And he said, go tell Yosef, please forgive your brothers for what the sin that they did. Now Yaakov never said that. They clearly lied. But nevertheless, for the sake of peace, they were allowed to change the story. Interesting, they said, Avicha, your father. They didn't say our father. So they tried to mitigate the lie that they were saying. Our father never said it. But as if your father would have said it. I'm not going to say as mitzvah, in fact, not only you permitted to lie for the sake of shalom bayis, but it's a mitzvah to lie, and not to say everything the way it is. Shmuel said, Shmuel said to Hashem, you want me to go and anoint David HaMelech? If the Shaul sees me there, he's going to accuse me of things. Shaul will hear and he'll hear me. And Hashem told him what he should do is take a carbon and say the reason why you're going is for the carbon. Now, there wasn't an absolute lie because it did bring the carbon, but that wasn't really the sole reason why he went. In fact, that wasn't even the reason why he went. He wanted to anoint David HaMelech. Godel HaShalom, priests are so great, even the Abish himself altered in order to keep the peace. First it says about first it says Sarah didn't express this belief that she'll have any children because Avraham Avinu was an old man. And then when Hashem repeated it to Avram, he said, Sarah said that I am old. She was talking about herself. In fact, she was talking about Avraham Avinu. Now, the truth of the matter is not even such a terrible case. So let's say she did say that Avram is an old man, but that's the truth. He was an old man. He was not even so embarrassing, but nevertheless pointing out to somebody their faults, not necessarily a good thing. And the Abba went ahead and changed just for that. Now, there's actually machlekes in the Foshim here, where initially she said, I am capable, and Avram is not capable. So that when Abba said, she said that I'm not capable was a 100% lie. Or she said we're both not capable, and the issue it was he omitted the part about Avram, just spoke about Sarah. And in the Gemara B'Metzia we have that there are 3 cases you're allowed to change, and here we say that you're allowed to change 1, or it's actually a mitzvah, even a mitzvah to change for the sake of shalom. The other cases there's not so much about shalom; it's also about tznius and so on. So we'll worry about it when we get to the Neil Mitzias. Abicha said the mitzvah, they both have a mitzvah. One of them said Allah and the other one said the halacha is not like a Abicha. This time I can only conclude that Rabbi Yechonu the Amar ain't halacha. Rabbi Yechonu said the halacha is not like a Abicha. Well, how do I know that? The Yossi Rabbavu's one sitting, Amar Mashmeid Rabbi Yechonu, and he said name Rabbi Yechonu. The halacha is like Abicha. Bahadrinu Rab Ami Rabasi, and 2 great students of Rab Ami Rabasi, they turned around to them and gave like a scorning look, saying, "What are you talking about? He never said such a thing." In other words, Rabbi Yechon did not rule this way. Rabbi Yechon did not rule this way. Then he want to continues. You could have another version of Chibar Abba. Chibar Abba is one who said Bahadrinu, and they turned around. The Rabbi Abba turned around. So as this, they basically gave him a stern look to show that that's not what Rabbi Yechon said. They didn't say anything, he just gave him a look. Rabbi was one who said the wrong thing. Covered by case because he was such a privileged member of society and he was close with the royal family. They didn't want to upset him. So they just gave him this look. They should say something that they should just openly say. Rabbi Yechon never said that. The Gemara remains the question. My Havila, bottom line, is there a mitzvah or isn't there a mitzvah? There was once an incident before Rabbi Yechon didn't have any children, and she came forward and she said, I want to have children. In the shul in case there's Kisari, and he ruled, if she demands it, you should have to divorce her, and and in fact, even though she's demanding to get out of the marriage and for no reason, if supposedly, and yet she has every right to insist and then get her full ksuba. So it means that she also has a mitzvah. She has no mitzvah. Why? If she wants to get out of the marriage, why should you have to give her a ksuba? Dilma, someone answers no. Dilma bebo machmas taina. She's coming along and saying, I want to have children, and forget about the mitzvah. He doesn't come about me. Amrle, she said, "Havli ksuba, give me ksuba." Amrle, zil go like mifkan. You have no mitzvah. Amrle, she said, "Misiba dula might have you love the hachitz. When I get older, what's going to happen to this woman? I want to have children." Amar, he said, he heard this case. In this case, surely will force because she has good grounds. She has good grounds and she's entitled to ksuba. He doesn't come to Nachman. Amrle, he said to her, "Let me what do you want? You have no mitzvah." Amrle, boy hachitza chutli other. She has stick someone she can support her. Somebody take care of and a shovel for the caver. In other words, someone take care of me. She's definitely right, and we will force him to divorce and give her a get. Yehuda the Chizkiah to Yehuda and Chizkiah were twins. One of their twins she carried for the full 9 months, and the one of them was full-fledged by the time 7 months went by. Is Yehudis, the vis of his wife's name is Yehudis, have a latzar later. She had terrible labor pains. So what she did was, a very clever woman, she changed her clothing, but also the kamlechi, and went to her husband, and her husband did not recognize her, which is a bit odd, unless she completely covered herself. Someone want to bring a proof to me that in those days women used to actually cover themselves. Even though more Shabbos we learned that it's wrong for a woman to cover her face. But it must be, otherwise, how in the world does not recognize his own wife? She said, Itza, a woman, tell me, does she have the mitzvah puravu? No. Oh, so she said, if I don't have the mitzvah puravu, I can go ahead and take family planning in hand. Also, she went, she drank some kind of a potion that made her, in a way, that incapable of making barren, capable of having children. The Saif Iglai Milsa, later on, her husband found out that it was her who came to her, and when he said there's no mitzvah, she went ahead and she made sure that she can no longer have children. Amallah, he said to her, I wish you gave me another pair of twins, because the Amama Yehuda v'Chizkiya Achi and Pazi v'Tavi Achwasa. Every time she gave birth, she had twins, and twins, I guess, the child made it much more difficult for her to carry, and she didn't want to carry anymore. But the Rebbe said, if you wouldn't have taken that potion, you could have had another set of twins, boys or girls. V'loi mifkati. And now you will not be able to have children. Sorry. You tell me that a woman doesn't have a mitzvah. In the story with a woman, she had two owners. She was a maid. She had two owners. A non-Jewish woman who was a maid, and she, and one of the owners decided to set her free. So now she's half a maid and half free. So one day a week she worked as a slave, one day she was free. The kafu as a rabbi, so the rabbis intervened, and they forced her remaining master and forced him to set her free. Now the only reason why they forced to set her free is because she can't get married, because she can't marry a Yiddish person because she's half a maid. She cannot marry an Eved because she's half free, so she can't have any children. So therefore, they forced the master to set her free so that she can be a full-fledged Jewess and she can get married and have children. So you want to ask, but if she has no mitzvah, then why did you force the master? And the problem is what there's an avera in setting free a slave. It says a non-Jewish slave, you have to always keep them. You have to set them free. So why would you have forced them to do an avera for no reason? There's no mitzvah involved. The problem was because she couldn't get married, she was very promiscuous and she was causing a lot of people to go astray. So therefore, for that reason, the Chacham decided, we're going to force the master to set her free, let her become a full convert, and therefore she can live a normal life. We'll continue tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a good day, everybody.